Okay, let's dive into this. You know, when we think of military heroes, we usually picture them winning these epic battles, right? But today, we're going to talk about George Washington's greatest victory. And here's the twist. It wasn't one with a sword. It was one with a single choice. A choice that literally saved the American Republic before it even got started. So to really get our heads around this huge idea, the bedrock principle of civilian control over the military, something we honestly take for granted, we actually have to go way, way back, like ancient Rome back. We need to meet a Roman farmer. So who was this guy? Well, this is what's known as the Cincinnatus ideal. Just picture this for a second. You're out on your farm, minding your own business, and your country calls. They give you absolute supreme power to save the nation from collapse. You win. And then, what do? Cincinnatus just gave it all back. No power grab, no becoming a dictator. He literally went back to his plow. And this story, this ideal, was something the American founders were completely obsessed with. All right, so let's fast forward a couple thousand years to the American Revolution. When the Continental Congress was looking for a commander, they had Cincinnatus stuck in their heads. See, they weren't just looking for a good general. They were desperately trying to find an American Cincinnatus and, maybe more importantly, trying to avoid creating an American Caesar. And this document right here, it shows you exactly what they were thinking. Look at it. That's not a crown or a scepter. It's basically a job offer. From day one, Washington's power didn't come from some divine right or even his own army. Nope. It was granted to him, very specifically, by a civilian government, the Continental Congress. And you gotta love the fine print. This one line, this is everything. It basically says he has to punctually observe and follow any orders he gets from Congress. Think about that. The commander-in-chief was, for all intents and purposes, an employee. His power had strings attached. He was legally required to listen to a bunch of politicians. In a world of kings and emperors, this was a mind-blowingly radical idea. So what did this actually mean for Washington's day-to-day? Well, it meant his job was way more political than military. He was basically a communicator-in-chief. He spent most of his time begging a totally broke Congress for money, pleading with 13 different state governments for shoes and gunpowder, and just trying to keep his suffering army from falling apart. He knew deep down that winning a battle here or there meant absolutely nothing if he lost the hearts and minds, if he lost the support of the government he served. But here's the thing. It's easy to have high-minded ideals on paper. The brutal reality of a long, miserable war would test this whole experiment, almost to the breaking point. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's like a highlight reel of disasters. In '76, the army almost just dissolves because enlistments are up. Then you have the legendary, horrifying winter at Valley Forge. At the same time, you've got the Conway Cabal, basically a political plot to get him fired and replaced. And by 1781, you have actual mutinies, with soldiers who haven't been paid for years rising up. These weren't just battlefield problems. These were existential threats from inside the revolution. And this image really drives that home. You have to understand, these guys weren't traitors. They were desperate. They were starving. They felt completely abandoned by the very government they were supposed to be fighting for. It shows you that the biggest threat to the new republic wasn't always the British. Sometimes it was the chance that the whole thing would just collapse from a lack of trust between the soldiers and the politicians. All of this, it's all building to a single moment. It's 1783. The war is pretty much won. And yet, this is when the most dangerous moment of the entire revolution happens. It's called the Newburgh Conspiracy. So what happens when you have a victorious army that hasn't been paid and feels totally betrayed by its own government? It's a terrifying question, right? They had all the guns. What were they going to do with them? The officer corps especially was on the brink. I mean, think about it. Their pay was years overdue, the lifetime pensions they were promised, totally worthless IOUs. They're watching politicians and war profiteers get rich while they're literally starving and freezing. So yeah, some of them started to conspire, even talking with some folks in Congress about maybe, using a little military muscle to get what they were owed. And they weren't subtle about it. This quote says it all. Any further experiments on their patients may have fatal effects. That's not a polite request. That is a threat, an ultimatum. Pay up or else. A military coup was absolutely on the table. So now you've got these two very different paths forward. On one hand, you have the conspirators, and they're even getting some quiet encouragement from guys like Alexander Hamilton, who want to use the army as a political sledgehammer. But Washington, He saw exactly where that road led. He wrote that an army is a dangerous instrument to play with. He understood that if the military could push the government around just one time, the whole idea of a republic was finished, done. It would set a ruinous precedent. This leads us to Washington's finest hour. And what happened next wasn't a battle with muskets and cannons. It was a battle for the very soul of the new nation. And it was fought with nothing more than words and a single, incredible moment of human vulnerability. So Washington knew he had to shut this down. The officers planned a secret meeting, and he basically said, "No, you're not doing that." Instead, he called a meeting of his own. And then, on March 15th, 1783, he shocks everyone by walking into the room unannounced to confront the conspiracy head on. He gets up there and he gives this powerful, prepared speech. He's appealing to their honor, to the glory they'd all won together. He begs them not to tarnish that legacy, not to open the floodgates of civil discord and deluge our rising empire in blood. He's practically pleading with them to not start a civil war. But it wasn't working. You can just imagine the scene. The officers are just sitting there, arms crossed, faces like stone. They were still angry. The speech was good, but it hadn't broken through all that bitterness and betrayal they felt. The coup was still on. And then, the moment happens. It's completely unscripted. Washington says he wants to read them a letter from Congress, and he starts fumbling in his coat pocket. He pulls out a new pair of spectacles, something none of his officers had ever seen him wear. And as he puts them on, he says, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country." And just like that, everything changed. The tension in the room just shattered. Men who were ready to overthrow the government started to openly weep. Because in that second, they didn't see a general anymore. They saw an old man who had grown gray and blind right alongside them, sacrificing everything he had for the cause. And just like that, the conspiracy was over. That single human moment did more than just stop a coup. It set a precedent. It cemented an ideal that would define the American military for the next 200+ years. I mean, let's be real. After the war, Washington was basically a god. He was the most powerful and revered man in the entire country, maybe the world. If he had wanted to be King George I of America, who's going to stop him? His army would have followed him anywhere. But he didn't take it. Instead, he became the American Cincinnatus. On December 23, 1783, he formally went before Congress, surrendered his commission, and went home, back to his farm. That act of willingly giving up ultimate power was arguably the final and most important victory of the entire revolution. It established without a shadow of a doubt the unbreakable rule that the military serves the nation, not the other way around. Period. And that leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? Could the American Republic have survived if its very first general had chosen power over principle? The whole experiment really did hang in the balance in that one room. It's an incredible reminder that sometimes real strength, the kind that builds nations, isn't about taking power. It's about having the character to give it away.